everyone. Hello, everyone. I am going to be passing around this piece of paper. If you wouldn't mind putting name and email address on this, when Walt is done with all the notes, I will be sending those out to everyone. We have weeks 4 through 8. Walt has finished weeks 4 through 8 up here, so if you didn't get them, you can come up here and get them, or somebody can help pass them out. Yeah, go Walt. Walt is the man. So if you'll just get these so that, oh my goodness, about to fall. Yeah, I am. So if you'll just get those so that I can get those notes to you when Walt gets it done, it'd be great. Hello, you made it. This word right here, Domitian, that's the emperor at the time of the book of Revelation. Emperor Domitian. Yes. Hopefully. Walt will hopefully get all this. He's working diligently. He has 4 through 8 done. If you remember week 3, we didn't actually get to record because the stupid computer was stupid. And then he'll get 1 through 3, and I'll email them to everybody. That is your water bottle. I know you so well.
I saw the cars out there, and I'm like, everybody's coming for Revelation. They weren't here the whole time.
How dare they? How dare they? Oh my goodness. You're also going to feel very lost if you only come to this class because everything else is built up to this. So, yeah. I mean, tell my mom that, but she didn't come every time. So. It's too easy. All right. Let me pray and pray for. I know. Pray you don't cause harm to me. I love you, Mom. All right. Yes. Okay. Sorry. Let me step this way so that. Dear Lord, help my mother. Thank you, God, for just a great group of people. This has been a fun class. We have learned a lot. And I pray that tonight is still another night where we learn. And that we see the book of Revelation isn't a scary book that should frighten us, but that gives us immense amount of hope. That you are the God who sits on the throne, and nothing will overcome that. Lord, I pray that you encourage our souls tonight. Draw us unto you. Draw us near to you. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right. I've already written a bunch of notes up here, and I know that this is a lot. This is limited amount of information that I could have put a lot more information up here, but this is phase 1 of information. Hold on 1 second. I got to pull up. Stop. Let's see. There it is. Okay, perfect. Okay. A few different things. Number 1, we're talking about Revelation tonight. This is the very last class. The Revelation, book of Revelation, it is not Revelations. It is not plural. It is singular. It is Revelation. The book of Revelation doesn't have to be scary or intimidating or frightening or, creepy or weird, and hopefully I'm going to help kind of pull back the mystery of it tonight. And also, I'm going to do my best, as you'll see. I'm going to stay what I would consider, and maybe some would, but what I would consider fairly conservative in the things I'm dealing with, and here's what I mean with conservative. I'm not going to deal with a crazy ton of the fringe debated issues, and I'm going to kind of deal more with just the text and hopefully illuminate just the text, because there's just all sorts of nuanced little things that people debate in the book of Revelation that we could get bogged down on, and we could just really focus on that one little kind of fringe thing. And I just don't particularly want to get bogged down in that, and I want to kind of cover the Revelation, book of Revelation, in a little bit more holistic fashion. So, okay? Now, before we dive into the book of Revelation, I would be remiss. I am not going to spend a ton of time dealing with this particular area, but I would be remiss if I didn't actually deal with this right here. This is where a lot of the focus of the book of Revelation gets focused on, is on these three categories. This is short for millennium. There's premillennials, there's postmillennials, and there's amillennials. And all of this boils down to a differences in interpretation of Revelation chapter 20 and then a building out from there. So I'm going to kind of give you the 30-second overview for each one, and then I'm going to give you a resource that you can go home, study yourself, you can look, you can decide for yourself, and you can kind of figure this out. The best book out there that I know of that handles these three issues very, very, very well in a very balanced way is a book called Across the Spectrum by Gregory Boyd and Paul Eddy, I believe is it. Yeah, Paul Eddy. By Across the Spectrum by Gregory Boyd and Paul Eddy. That's actually a really, really good book. If you're just wondering, you want to go into kind of what are some different things that Christians believe? Like, what are some kind of issues where we take different sides on? This particular book, Across the Spectrum, it goes through numerous different issues that the church kind of deals with and discusses and argues. And then they have scholars from each one of those perspectives write about their particular viewpoint. So when they deal with the premillennial, the postmillennial, and the amillennial, they actually have scholars from those give their particular viewpoint on these issues. So it's just a really good book to kind of inform yourself of what other people believe. And the important thing to note is that all of this, Christians believe. And here's what I mean. Christians disagree on these issues, but just because they disagree on these particular issues makes them no less Christian. Because everyone agrees on this. This is what, if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, you believe that Jesus will return. That is a non-negotiable. It's foundational to our faith. We believe that one day Jesus will return. And the moment you step past that sentence is the moment when discussions and arguments happen. So the close-handed theology is that Jesus will return. The open-handed theology, the what does it look like, that's where all the debates happen. So I'm just going to kind of walk through each one of these really briefly and then let you kind of go home and research yourself, read some more. Yes, if you'll, email address, name, all that type of stuff. Is this everybody's on here? Has everybody written their name and email address on here? Yeah, okay. Here, there you go. I think she was using that earlier. Okay, perfect. All right, let's quickly walk through this so we can actually have some fun in the book of Revelation. Premillennialists, which would be under the umbrella of futurist. They believe that everything from Revelation chapter 4 through the end of Revelation deals with future historical events. And they do their best to try to figure out what do those future historical events represent. That's how premillennials view it. They believe that there's a literal millennium, a literal 1,000 years, that can only be ushered in by Jesus' return. That would be the premillennial. And from there, from this, and if you're a little bit lost, this is why I'm giving you resources to go home and study for yourself. So I just don't want to spend a ton of time here. From the premillennial viewpoint, you actually have two other subsets of that. You have pre-tribulation premillennialist. This is the only group of people that actually believe that there's a rapture. Premillennial pre-tribs are people who believe that Jesus will come back twice. They believe he'll come back with the rapture, and they believe he'll come back with the millennium. So underneath pre-trib, there's also what are called dispensationalists. This is kind of important to note. This particular premillennial kind of rose up about the 1200s. It's kind of our best of our ability. We can assess that it rose about the 1200s, this particular bent. And from there, pre-trib and dispensationalism, pre-trib was in the 1800s. So it's really a new theology. It was in the 1800s. There was a priest over in Ireland, and he was seeing all of the people in his church, and they weren't taking things seriously enough. They weren't taking their faith seriously enough, was his assessment. His name is John Darby. And they weren't taking their faith seriously enough, and so he began to kind of preach this pre-tribulation rapture theology that you're going to be snatched up and it's going to happen and you're going to get out of here and there's two comings of Christ. So this is, and dispensationalists, they really focus on the temple and Jerusalem very heavily. This is the Left Behind books. All of this is the Left Behind books. If you have a study Bible like Ryrie is a study Bible, if you have one of these, they are premillennial, but farther down, they're pre-trib dispensationalists, and they read the Bible with a certain bent. From there, you also have post-tribs. They do not believe in a rapture. They're a little bit different. Then let's get into the post-millennials. They are what's called preterist. And here's what preterists are. They believe that the book of Revelation was about events that happened during the Roman Empire. That the book of Revelation, up until about 20, partway through 20, that it was about events that were dealing with things that were going on at Rome and through Jesus' death and resurrection and for the church. So they believe that. Postmillennialists believe that through the spreading of the gospel, they can usher in the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And through the 1,000-year reign of Christ, they're ushering in the return of Christ. Here's what happens. If you actually study these various different millennial viewpoints, you will notice that there is a spike in the belief in them depending upon the culture that you find them in. So, pre-tribulation, pre-millennial typically has a more pessimistic view of the world and a pessimistic view of life, and this took a massive rise out of, first of all, the Irish pastor, but then also it took a huge rise in the early 1900s of our culture. The biggest proponent of pre-trib, premillennials are Americans. And it took a massive rise after World War I and World War II, especially in 1948 when Israel got its property again, got its land again. This took a massive rise because we saw all of these terrible things of war going on, and we were like, these terrible things of war going on, God, get us out of here. And it's just invariably, if you trace back, these things are associated with the culture that they find themselves in. Whereas post-millennial, two of the movements that this gets associated with is, first of all, Jonathan Edwards, who was a part of the revival taking place here in America hundreds of years ago, as well as the Wesleyan holiness movement. Both of them are big proponents of, we just need to spread the gospel throughout all the nations, and if we spread the gospel throughout all the nations, then we can bring the kingdom of God here, okay? And they would view the book of Revelation just as events that happened back then that John was speaking to his audience, and he was also reminding them of the future hope of the new heaven and the new earth. Where this one can go derailed is there was one particular period of Christian history where the post-millennial, we can make the kingdom of God happen, derailed. Can anybody think of a time where there was in Christian history a derailing of, we can just force the kingdom of God here? Can anybody think of that? The Crusades. The Crusades were bred out of postmillennialism, of we'll just force the kingdom of God here. And it obviously was a misinterpretation and misuse and abuse, but it was. Postmillennials can often be accused of blind utopians, that they just think that they can somehow create this utopian society. And then the other one is amillennials, which is not a perfect name, but they believe that the 1,000-year reign is just a metaphor. We've talked about metaphors before. Remember, metaphor doesn't mean it's not real, okay? Metaphor means that it is a concrete idea pointing to a true reality. So they don't believe that there's actually a 1,000-year reign, but it's a metaphor for Jesus' current reign prior to his return. They're called idealist. They're called idealist because they would say that the book of Revelation was definitely dealing with the issues going on in Rome, but it's also a constant daily reminder for our Rome that we're dealing with. That would be the way that amillennials viewed this. The earliest, this is actually the earliest one that we can see. The earliest is this, and this would be Augustine. He was the biggest proponent of this one, and you just have to think, on Augustine's kind of standpoint, Rome is kind of adopting Christianity as their religion of choice by this point. Like, the persecution has started to end, and Rome is adopting the Christianity mindset, starting with Constantine and the like. And so Augustine thinks, made it. Like, we're good. We're good. So for him, he obviously had a natural bent towards this particular perspective because of the culture which he found himself in. So this is what I want to remind you of. Okay? All of these are Christians. Like, all of them believe that Jesus is returning. They disagree on some of these issues. They disagree on how it's going to look. And they would even disagree on attitudes, on mindsets, on ways to handle things. So if you are a pre-trib dispensationalist, you run the risk of being an escapist. Like, I just want to get out of here. I just want to get out of here. Get me out of here. Like, you just kind of run that risk. But if you're a post-millennial, you just run the risk of just saying, well, we're just going to make utopia happen. And both of those, like, each one has its own downfalls, okay? So I'm particularly not married to any one of these. And that's important to me because for anybody who knows me, when I am told to pick option A or B, I just refuse. And I just say yes. Because I rarely do I see the validity in pigeonholing into one particular tribe. If you had to nail me down into one, I would say I'm both of a post-millennial amillennialist, somewhere in the middle of the two of those. But even then, I'm not going to argue that hard about it. That's just where I would kind of find myself in. I have issues with people who make me try to commit. That's what I have issues with. So so it's like, you ask me my political party, are you Republican or Democrat or Libertarian? Yes. Okay, well, but which one? Yes. It's like, I don't want to be, I just hate it, just to my core. It bothers me. So that's going to be my natural wiring is going to lead me in this kind of particular space. That doesn't mean that I am the end-all, be-all of knowledge. It just means that this is my particular bent. Now, we're going to leave all that aside because I don't have a particular interest in dealing with this that much. It's just not that fun to me. I'm going to deal more with the whole book of Revelation and all that's going on in there. Okay. It means what? Yes, I did know that. Agnostic, what does that mean? No, Gnostic is the Greek word for knowing. So A means, I don't know. So if you're an atheist, I don't believe in a theism. If you're agnostic, you're like, maybe. So yeah, very good. Most of our language is either Greek or Latin in nature, and then, yeah, that's just fun. Before I introduce Revelation and all the stuff we're going to talk about, raise your hand. Does Revelation ever confuse you? Raise your hand. Okay, good. All right, good. It's confusing, right? I'm going to read you a story. This is Megan. This is a story about Megan, of her doing her hair. Now, my wife, for those of you that don't know, she is a cosmetologist. She does hair. She's been doing hair for years. And even though she's done hair for years, every once in a while, this happened not that long ago. She mixed some color, and the color was put onto her hair by one of her coworkers, and it didn't quite turn out exactly perfectly. But let me read you the story. You got to follow. Megan says, I decided I need a hair change. The new it color was mushroom brown, a grayish purplish cool colored brown. I mixed up the colors, planned it out, and everything was good to go. Shauna, her coworker, put on the color and we let it process for 40 minutes like normal. She washed out my hair and started drying it when we realized a band of hair around my head had turned green. Tarnished copper penny green. We stared at each other for a few minutes, occasionally awkwardly, laughing at the insanity of it. We then put on our color theory caps to figure out what to do. We could strip the color and try again, or we could try to neutralize the green. Red neutralizes green, so we decided to go that route. I grabbed the book of color swatches to figure out which one to use. As I looked at the color wheel, it all clicked. I had mixed 5BA with 5NA and 6NV. In this color line, ash was yellow-green. Usually it's blue-green. I mixed a yellow-green with a blue-green, equally double-green. Thus my tarnished penny here. I had to use 6NRV to cancel out the green I had accidentally created. Anybody confused with that? Right? Okay, like completely confusing. To Megan, that all makes perfect sense. Because she is in the hair world, and she understands color theories. She has information in that particular area that make perfect sense to her. And the fact of the matter is that if she got enough time to sit down and teach you how color works, you would understand too. But it would probably take a little bit of time, and you would have to get immersed into the hair world in order to be able to really understand what all was going on in that story I just read to you. Okay? I tell you that story to say that's the book of Revelation. Is that you have to be immersed in a level of knowledge that is going to feel overwhelming. This is the abbreviated list I came up with of things that you just need to know. I mean, you need to know the same way that you know how tall you are. Like, you need to know this. This is just built into information that you have so that when you enter into the book of Revelation, you are pulling from an encyclopedia of information. And this is why Revelation feels overwhelming to you, because most of you are not immersed in all of this. In fact, some of you weren't even immersed in some of it till last week. Like, you'd never even heard the sea metaphor. You didn't even know what it meant. And so we get to the book of Revelation, and it feels so overwhelming, like we're reading 6NRV, and we're like, what is 6NRV? I don't understand. But if we gather a library of information and we come into the book of Revelation, then it begins to get a little bit clearer. Now, there's still some parts that we don't know, and we're confused, but it definitely helps. So I'm going to just walk through some of these, and then we're going to get into the book of Revelation. All right. So first of all, if you have not been in my class, then you don't remember, read through the book of Genesis. If you want to build your vocabulary for the Bible, if you want to understand the language of the Bible, read through Genesis, then read through it again, and then when you're done, read through it again, and when you're done, read through it again. If you read through Genesis over and over and over and over again, you will find that you have built up a library of vocabulary in order to understand the rest of the scriptures. The psalmist, the prophets, the book of Revelation, all of them are picking up themes that are created in Genesis, and especially in Genesis 1 through 11. I mean, I've just over and over throughout this class, I've just shown you how, like, if you start with Genesis 1 through 11, you can find virtually every theme of the Bible. The second thing you need to understand is Babylon as an archetype for evil empires. Babylon is an archetype for evil empires in the Old Testament, and then by the time Revelation comes around, it becomes this archetype for all evil empires throughout all of history. And it's just been a theme that has started in Genesis chapter 11 and has worked its way all the way through the Old Testament, through the prophets, and through to the book of Revelation. You need to understand the Exodus narrative, right? The bowls and the trumpets and the seals, they are a combination of references from the book of Zechariah and the 10 plagues that have been put into a blender, put on high, and then spit back out. But if you know the Exodus narrative, you see them and you're like, oh, I've seen this before. I understand. I've read this before. This is a library of information. You need to understand the Shema. The Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. Deuteronomy 6:4. This is a fundamental, foundational, what do you as a Jewish follower believe? The Shema. The Shema is at your core of what you believe, that the Lord is one. We'll read it real quick. Deuteronomy 6:4. Let's see. Deuteronomy 6:4. Oh my gosh, I have so much to cover. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Man, it's amazing. When Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment is, he quoted the Shema. Like for him, this is the ideal. The ideal is the Shema. This is why when you get into Revelation chapter 13, where we're going to get into in a little bit, and the beast are asking you to recite the anti-Shema. But you only know it's the anti-Shema if you already know the Shema. But when you read it, if you already know the Shema and you get to Revelation 13, you're like, oh, they're asking me to do the opposite of this. They're asking me to worship not the one true God, but the other gods. You need to understand name theology. Name theology. So throughout the Old Testament, God puts his name in things. It's like his name is Yahweh and distinct from Yahweh. So when he talks about putting his presence in the tabernacle and leaving it there, he puts his name there, as if his name is some physical object, like as if his name has some sort of physical presence. And you just need to understand the name theology of how important this is, that the name is Yahweh but is distinct from Yahweh. And this is where it gets really interesting. So in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain. It's not like, don't say, oh my God, that's the worst thing you could say. No, it's that the name Yahweh, which if you remember a few weeks ago, I told you, God's name, Moses, I am that I am. Yahweh is he is that he is. And so you don't take that in vain. Like you don't take that lightly because instead of, I was actually listening to this earlier this week, the Hebrew word where it's for take, a better idea is carry. That you don't carry this name around lightly. That when you carry Yahweh around, you know that you are carrying around the name of the God of the universe. And so you need to understand name theology. And I'm just touching the surface of stuff. You need to understand Trinitarian theology. That there are three distinct persons of God, yet they are the same. And if you thought like, this is just New Testament theology that just comes onto the pages of history. No, this is like built for thousands of years. So this is really cool. This is really interesting. So Genesis 1 and 2. You probably never realized you saw the Trinity there. So the Trinity, Genesis 1 and 2, you have God hovering over the waters. You have the Spirit, the breath coming out, and then what creates? The Word. So, first pages of the Bible, you have Trinitarian language that the New Testament just built on. If you want to build a library of language for the Bible, you need to read Genesis and reread Genesis and reread Genesis. And so John 1 calls Jesus the Word. The Word. That he is one with God and distinct from God. You just need to understand this because by the time you get to the book of Revelation, there is an anti-Trinitarian language. There is anti-Trinitarian theology. So you can follow God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, or you can follow the sea creature dragon, you can follow the beast, or you can follow the prophet. So you have your choice. You can follow God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, or the anti-Trinitarian. And if you're just tracking with the Bible, you see these patterns. The ideal state metaphor, which we talked about last week, that the ideal state is a mountain, temple, garden, fortress. And if you're lost, go back and watch last week. But the ideal state throughout Scripture is a mountain, temple, garden, fortress. And we learn that in Psalm that not only is that the ideal state, but God is described as that ideal state. That's a whole language that we built on last week. Understanding that the chaotic sea waters. So remember, we walked through the entire Old Testament, all the way through baptism, all the way through the book of Revelation, where in Revelation 21, what's not there? The sea. And the sea is a metaphor for death and destruction that has been built from page 1 through Noah, through the Exodus, through the Psalms, through the prophets, through baptism, all the way to the point where it gets to the book of Revelation. So the sea is this chaos that brings death and destruction. And from there, if you were here last week, you remember we described that as the top category of the bookshelf, and then you have all these different schemes underneath it. So like the sea is bad, but the river is good. And so in Revelation, you have the river flowing, the river of life flowing in Revelation 22, but you also have the dragon that has a river. And you already have a scheme for all this in your mind if you've tracked with the whole Bible. You know that that river is the opposite of God's river. Like that river is not the good river. That river brings death, destruction, and chaos because this is the dragon sea monster. Like you've already tracked with it. Do you understand? Like you have to have, I've only covered one side. You have to have a library of information before jumping into Revelation or you're just going to feel lost. You're just going to feel very lost, and it's okay. It's the same way I feel when Megan describes that her 6N RV wasn't right, whatever that means, but that's okay. You need to know various different names for Jesus. You need to know the significance of the Lamb. We're going to get into that one for a little bit, in a little bit. This one is so important. Man, I'm not even exaggerating to you. I have had the day of the Lord in my notes for 3 separate weeks, and I never got to it once. And I'm not going to get to it tonight. But this is foundational idea that you just need to track with, that starts with Babylon and then goes to the Exodus. The very first day the day is mentioned is in the song in Exodus chapter 15 when Moses, and he calls it the day where God brings judgment on Egypt. And that just gets picked up on throughout the rest of the Bible until you get to Revelation. So you just, there is a great, this is what it looks like. This is on the Bible Project. This is a whole 10, 12 pages on the Day of the Lord theme. And this just walks you through what the Day of the Lord is. You can go to thebibleproject.com and you can get this for free. It's an absolutely free resource. If you track with this theme, it helps you understand the book of Revelation way better because the book of Revelation is just a fleshed out, hyperbolic, big version of the Day of the Lord. Day of the Lord, anybody confused yet? Okay, good. All right. You need to be immersed. You're just totally immersed. You need to be swimming in, totally understand all the language, all the verbiage, all the words. You need to totally get Daniel 7, Daniel 9, Daniel 12. You just need to know it. I mean, John, the author of Revelation, just assumes you know it all. He just assumes it. And not only do you need to understand Daniel 7, Daniel 9, Daniel 12, you also need to fully understand Isaiah and the book of Ezekiel, which I don't know, many of us, but maybe you haven't been reading Isaiah and Ezekiel lately, because that one's confusing too. Like, I understand. So, like, all of the throne room visions that John has in the book of Revelation, he literally just takes every other throne room experience that happens in the Bible. He takes Isaiah 6, Ezekiel 1, and Daniel 7, and he just throws them into a blender, and out comes his throne room visions. But he's just assuming that you know all this. Like, he's just assuming that you've read it, that you've reread it, that you understand it well. He's just assuming because all of his readers would have known it. They would have just known all this stuff. If you feel overwhelmed, that's okay. I do too sometimes. We're in this together. You need to totally embrace Zechariah and Joel's theology because he just keeps referencing Zechariah and Joel, and he does it in subtle ways, and he does it in overt ways. And if you don't know Zechariah or Joel, and you've never read Zechariah or Joel, then you don't know what he's talking about in the book of Revelation. You have tracked with the kingdom of God / heaven. If you don't remember this, go back to week 2 It's on YouTube. It's on the church app. Go back to week 2 where I talk about the 2 dimensions, that the garden is the unifying of heaven and earth, that heaven is one dimension and earth is another dimension, and the garden is the unifying of those. And after sin entered, there was a split of that, and then there were pockets and spaces where heaven and earth met in the Old Testament, and those spaces were the tabernacle and the temple until Jesus comes onto the pages of history, and Jesus is the space where heaven meets earth. And his prayer, the Lord's Prayer, is, "Thy will be done, thy kingdom come." Hold on. On earth as it is in heaven. Like the goal of the whole Bible, and the book of Revelation is not to get us to heaven, but for heaven to come here. Like, that's the whole point of it. Heaven is a reality. It is a dimension. It is a space in which we go to, in which we die, but it is not the end of the story. The end of the story is that heaven comes here, and John is just assuming that you've tracked with the whole Bible in this, that you just have tracked with all of it. You know all of it. Like, you've just got this language built inside of you. You should be familiar with numerology, with Jewish numerology in particular. And you should understand what the number 7 means, the number 12 means. You should understand that letters in Hebrew names, letters in Hebrew, that they signify also numbers. You should understand these things. It's just assuming you do, right? Like, and I don't know about any of you guys. This is not something I spend my life just thinking, well, let me build up a library of information. Praise the Lord, there's been people who have, and have helped us throughout the ages. You need to understand ancient cosmology in the 3-tiered universe. Ancient cosmology believed that the universe was divided into 3 spaces, that you had the skies above, you had the seas below, and you had the earth. And that's the cosmology in which they work with, that you had a 3-tiered universe. And then on top of the 3-tier universe, you had the celestial space, the heavenly space, and you had the earthly space. You had terrestrial space. It's just assuming that you understand ancient cosmology in the 3-tiered universe. It's just assuming that you know all this stuff. This is the one that we're going to get to in just a little bit. Oh my word, it's 7 o'clock already. It's fine. The book of Revelation assumes you know everything about the divine council that the Old Testament talks about. And my guess is that most of you don't have a clue what the divine council is. But the book of Revelation assumes you understand what the divine council is, what that looks like, what the rebellion that happened through the divine council, that you understand all this. And I'm going to flesh this out in a little bit. But we learn, let's see. I'll get to this part later. There's a disinheriting of the nations that happened, and then God's goal through the book of Revelation is a reclaiming of the nations. You also need to know that stars are divine beings in the Old Testament. The stars are viewed as divine beings that you can just track through. Here, take a Bible, Amos chapter 5. Amos chapter 5. And I could do this all over the place, but Amos chapter 5. I know, right? You're like, who was planning on going to the book of Amos? We're supposed to do Amos chapter 5. Amos chapter 5. Let's see. Amos chapter 5. Okay. It says, verse 25, Amos 5, verse 25. Did you bring to me sacrifices and offering during the 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? You shall take up Sekuth, your king. That's the king of Assyria. You shall take up Sekuth, your king, and Kayun, your star god, and I will send you into exile beyond Damascus. The god of Assyria was Kayun, and this was the star god. Like this, they just assumed that stars were gods. Like this is the ancient belief in the Old Testament of the divine council and that stars are divine beings. So when the dragon whips his tail around and stars fall from heaven, it's that divine beings are rebelling and have gone out of God's presence. But you just know this. You just know all this stuff. Or you should, before you read the book of Revelation. And if not, it's okay to not read it. Jesus is coming, okay? All right? Last but not least, you need to have an awareness of Roman context from Nero to Domitian. We've already dealt with Augustus, Julius Caesar, and Augustus, and all that, and the Son of God language. But you also need to know Nero and Domitian. I have brought, this is just one of the works. This is a Jewish historian called Josephus. He was living around the time of Domitian and later, and he wrote the history of the Jewish people, but he also wrote a massive amount of information, as you can tell, about Rome and about what Rome was like. This is just one of the countless sources that we have information about this time period. We have a lot of information about this time period. And they just assume you understood all this stuff. Like, they just assume. Let me give you an example in our own language, and then we'll actually get to some fun, because we haven't even gotten to Revelation yet. I've just told you all the stuff you need to know. When I use the phrase, and hopefully you know, when I use the phrase affirmative action, you probably know what that means. That it means that in the public sector and in college institutions, that there needs to be a certain quota hired of various different ethnicities, that there is a quota that needs to be met for affirmative action. Those two words, affirmative action, put on themselves, you wouldn't know what they mean if you read those words 1,000 years from now, unless you understood the history of our nation and you understood the context in which those words were used, and those words were used together. So what we have to do is we have to figure out what was going on back then to understand what they were trying to say. Okay? Anybody overwhelmed? Raise your hand. Overwhelmed? Good. Okay, great. It's fun. I'm going to skip a section because I want to get everything done. Would you mind erasing this? You are so wonderful. You are so wonderful. The Greek word parousia is often translated as coming, and there is this Greek word parousia is used often in the New Testament, but it's only used in a handful of times to address what's called the second coming. The second coming. It's only, got to spell it right. I don't know why any of you would check my Greek, but whatever. I felt like my Greek teacher was watching me and be like, I know what you did. This word is used often, and it's used often as the word coming, like somebody's coming, but it's used just a couple of times in the phrase the second coming. The second coming. It's only used just a very handful of times. This is an opinion of many scholars, and I totally buy into this, that coming is one way to interpret this word, but a more robust way of interpreting this word would be presence. Would be presence. That one day, we now have the presence of the Holy Spirit, but one day, there will be a second presence of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, physically manifested, bringing heaven to earth. And so I just like this idea of, so next time you read the second coming in your Bible, just in your mind, just think of it in terms of the second presence, like the presence of Jesus Christ is going to return. And this is important because it means that we don't believe in just some disembodied state like Plato or anything like that, but that we believe in a physical resurrection with a physical body, that Jesus will return with that. Now, thank you. You're so wonderful forever and always. If you have been with me in this class the whole time, you know that through the death and resurrection, that Jesus Christ inaugurated himself as king and ushered in his kingdom, that the cross was his enthronement, and that he, like Daniel chapter 7, was placed into a seat of authority as king of the universe at the cross and the resurrection. He is king. Is Caesar king? Is Caesar Lord? No. Jesus is Lord. He is king, and he has ushered in his kingdom. We believe that at our core. And the first century followers of Jesus Christ believed that at their core. But the question they wanted to ask, and the question that you ask still today, is if Jesus is king, why is Rome still in charge of me? And not only why is Rome still in charge of me, why is Rome killing us? Like, if Jesus is really king, if Jesus is really in authority, if he conquered sin, death, and evil on the cross and the resurrection, then why? Why am I still being persecuted? To which the book of Revelation seeks to answer that question. This is, I thought about how to make this a little bit simpler and a little shorter, but I didn't have a way to do it. So, this is the book of Revelation, is this message. No Babylon will ever succeed in overthrowing the kingdom of God. I'm going to use the kingdom of heaven language. It's synonymous, but I think it's a little bit better language for our minds to interpret. The kingdom of heaven, inaugurated by King Jesus. Those who are faithful in the meantime will experience physical resurrection and life. This is the message. This is the message that the book of Revelation sought to teach the followers of the time. And this is what the book of Revelation continues to try to teach us today. That no Babylon, not Rome, not North Korea, not, God forbid, America, no Babylon will overthrow the kingdom of heaven inaugurated by King Jesus. But those who are faithful in the meantime will experience physical resurrection and life. This is the plot line that is driving the whole book. This is just the theme that just keeps, and if this were a class on Revelation, I would just, I would spend each week dealing with one word, but we don't have time to do this. But this is the thrust of it. So let me introduce you to the times in which the audience of Revelation found themselves. The book of Revelation is the last book written, not just the last book in the New Testament, it was the last book written. It was most likely written in the mid-90s. There's some debate. Some people believe it was written during the reign of Nero, which would have been in the 60s. I do not think that is a good interpretation. Who cares? The consensus, general consensus, is that it was written in the mid-90s during when Emperor Domitian was the Caesar in charge of Rome at the time. Now, Domitian, not a good dude for Christians. Like, you thought Nero was bad, Domitian ramps it up even worse. Like, you've already had the destruction of the temple, and then the persecution gets ramped up even more. Because Domitian views himself, history remembers him as some kind of megalomaniac that just kind of believed himself to be better than he was. If you remember, after Julius Caesar dies and Octavian Augustus comes to power as the emperor of Rome, that he believed that Caesar ascended into heaven and that there were witnesses that proved that he ascended into heaven, and because Julius Caesar was divinized, that made Caesar Augustus the son of God. And all of the coins during Caesar Augustus times, here's what the coins said. They read, There is no name save Augustus by which men can be saved. This was the coin. Like every coin, like they're going to buy stuff, and this is what the coin says on it for Rome, is that no men can be saved but by Augustus. Now, there's some debate on whether or not Augustus took it all seriously. Some scholars think that he just kind of wasn't really into all this Son of God stuff, but he did it because he was the Caesar. Some people think he was all into it. That doesn't matter. By the time Domitian comes around, you've had a few emperors come and go. You've had Nero, and you have Vespasian, and you've had Domitian. By the time Domitian comes around, he is committed to this Son of God motif. And he believes that he is divine. So much so that he made every single person, he made every single person address him as our Lord and God. Like he was committed to it. So much so, he made his own wife call him that. Bad move, Buster. She tried to kill him later, obvious reasons. But he was totally bought into his divine self. He was totally, and he built for himself entire cities directed towards him and his glorious name. The town of Ephesus, it got built a temple and a shrine just to Domitian. And as you went into the town of Ephesus, you were given this opportunity to burn incense for Lord and God, Domitian. And you were able to give some money to Domitian as the Lord and God. This is the interesting thing. When he would make a royal appearance, when Emperor Domitian would make a royal appearance, this is what he would do. He would have 24 choir members follow him around, and they would all sing this. They would all sing, "Our Lord and our God, you are worthy to receive honor, glory, and power." Take your Bible, turn to Revelation 4. Revelation 4, verse 10. Revelation 4, verse 10. This is the first throne room thing that happens. Second throne room. Chapter 1's first throne room. Chapter 4, verse 10. Then 24 elders fall down before him who is seated on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever, and they cast their crowns before the throne, saying, "Worthy are you, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power." And not only that, for you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created. Listen, come on, Domitian, you might think yourself Lord and God. Ours created it all. Deal with that. Like, you understand? Like, they're dealing with a very specific context of Emperor Domitian is this kind of megalomaniac character who has elevated himself to believe himself to be the divine Son of God, and everybody should worship him and everybody should bow down to him. And those who were unwilling to worship him, those who were unwilling to bow down to him, they had one of two things happen to him. They either lost their livelihood or they lost their lives. Like, this was the threat that the audience John was speaking to was dealing with, is that Emperor Domitian demanded everybody worship him. And if they did not, then their lives were at stake or their livelihoods were at stake. This leads us to Babylon. It's no wonder that the Jewish and Christian faith, both of them at the time, saw Rome as a version of Babylon. It's a newer version of Babylon. It's the newer version of Egypt. It's the newer version where humanity, through its own institution, tries to elevate itself to the status of God. Now, Babylon takes various different forms. Babylon, on one sense, is the chaos sea monster dragon. And the chaos sea monster dragon that we see in Revelation chapter 12. Now, this is important. The chaos sea monster dragon, he is all of the forces of evil that have been working throughout history to go against the plan of God into one particular singular entity. So, I've told you this a few times. The serpent, the Satan, the devil, like all of these words have meanings in Greek. So the Satan means the accuser. So it's the one who says, no, Yahweh's not right. Don't follow him. So the devil is the gossip. It's the liar. It's the no, come on, don't listen to him. And all of these are titles that are given to this serpent, this creature. And eventually, by the time Revelation comes around, it just fuses all of these ideas together into one. And not only that, but it says this sea creature monster dragon, this is the force that is behind Rome and every other Rome. Like, this is the force that is behind Babylon, the unseen, you don't know it's there force that has been pushing an entire civilization off axis to the point in which their king has elevated themselves to God. If you have your Bible, go ahead and Revelation chapter 12. Oh my gosh. I'm going to get through everything. You just watch me. It's going to happen. Revelation chapter 12. And sorry, Walt, I don't even know. Do you have a hand cramp already, Walt? Because you probably do. I'm sorry. I'm all over the map tonight. Let's see, Revelation 12. Revelation 12:9. Revelation 12:9. And the great dragon was thrown down, that serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. So he's just taking all of these names, and if you keep reading, it talks about the serpent, all these things. He just throws all of these ideas that you've been tracking with since Genesis 1. He throws all of them into one form as this dragon. And remember I talked about earlier? Actually, let's do the beast monsters. That'll be another fun one. Babylon is the chaotic sea monster dragon thing, which is weird, but it's the chaotic sea monster dragon. But if you're tracking with biblical metaphors throughout the whole Bible, you're not even surprised by this. Like, you understand it. Also, you're probably up to date on the Enuma Elish, so you understand Marduk and what all happened with there. Like, you just understand all these things because you're in this culture and you get it all. And so you've seen all these other surrounding gods and these surrounding villages, and you know all their beliefs, and you just know all this stuff. So the dragon thing isn't surprising to you. It's surprising to us because it's not the language in which we use, but in their context, it wouldn't have been abnormal. It wouldn't have been crazy. Then you get into, so Babylon is the dragon, but Babylon is also the beasts. Now, man, I just totally wish. I didn't have time to do it last week, but it would have been really fun. If I could have tracked you through the whole Bible of how this is a theme that starts in Genesis 1 and 4, Genesis 2 and 4, and then just gets built throughout there. So, when there is sin, when there is sin that is pushing Cain to kill his brother, do you remember what it's called? It says that sin was crouching at his doors, like an animal about to pounce. And the idea that gets built from there throughout the whole Old Testament is that those who give themselves over to sin and those who try to be the definers of good and evil, which was Cain's sin, that and murder, but those who try to define good and evil become the beasts. Until you get to Nebuchadnezzar in the book of Daniel, and you're like, oh yeah, I've been tracking with this metaphor for a few thousand years. Thanks for coming onto the pages, Daniel. I get it. Because Nebuchadnezzar, he goes crazy and he becomes the beast. He becomes this beast. And this just gets picked up in Jewish literature and Jewish thought of those who try to elevate themselves to the status of God, whether it be an individual or whether it be an entire organization, they are the beast. They are the beast. And you're just tracking with this because you've been reading your whole Bible and you know this stuff. Like, it just makes sense to you. And so the beast in chapter 13, this is synonymous with the Roman government. Jews believe this, and Christians believe this. And you can just learn this. This is in Josephus's writings. This is in various other writings, that they called it the beasts. They called them the beasts. And so in this instance, it's Rome and their power that has elevated themselves to the status of God and making them think as though they are almighty. And it is their entire institution that has brought injustice upon the poor and the needy. That it isn't just that they believe themselves to be God, but it's also the entire system, that both of those are corrupt. And so the book of Revelation, it keeps retelling the same stories over and over and over again in just kind of different forms, in different fashions. So it's telling you about Babylon in 12 and 13, but it's just telling you, is the Babylon the dragon? Yes. Is the Babylon the beast of Rome? Yes. Who's at fault? Yes. Yes, it's both. Who did Jesus come to defeat? Yes. Yes, he came to defeat the dragon that has been working against the plans of God since the very beginning. Did he come to defeat those who try to elevate themselves to the status of God? Yes. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. So this is where I want to get into. Oh my gosh. I want to get into a little bit of the divine counsel, motif. This might be new to you. Bear with me. It's okay. You can go home and read for yourself. If you want a book about all this, the book is called The Unseen Realm by Dr. Michael Heiser. If you want a whole book about this, The Unseen Realm by Dr. Michael Heiser. We learn in the Old Testament, in passages like Psalm 82, Deuteronomy 32, Genesis 11, or Genesis 10, that there was a disinheriting of the nations that happened at the Babylon event. And through that disinheriting of the nations, God gave those nations over to divine beings who had rebelled against his plans. That God gave them divine beings. See, God is a God who delegates responsibility. We just see that from very early on. Genesis 1, 26 and 27. He has delegated the responsibility of caretaking the earth to humanity. That God is a God who delegates responsibility. He is supremely sovereign, but he delegates responsibility. And we learn, Psalm 82, Deuteronomy 32, and various other passages, Job 1, all these other things, that there has been a disinheriting of the nations. And after that disinheriting of the nations event, there has been one nation that God chose out of all the other nations in which he is going to bring about his redemptive plan to reclaim all of the nations. And that nation is the nation of Israel. This is Genesis. This is why Genesis 11 is right next to Genesis 12, where you have the disinheriting of the nations and the Tower of Babylon experience, and you have God inheriting the nation of Israel in Genesis chapter 12 through Abraham. So, bear with me. I'm sure your heads are spinning. And, oh my gosh. There was a disinheriting of the nations. And so these other divine beings, and in fact, this is where it gets confusing in our Bibles. If you read in Psalm 82, it calls these other beings gods. And that's just because there's a difficulty in translation coming over to English. It's Elohim. It's Elohim. And Elohim is the same word that is used in Genesis chapter 1 to describe God. But these are lesser Elohims. These are lesser Elohims, and they're called sons of God. Job 1:6. There are lesser Elohim, lesser divine beings, who have been disinherited, and they are now ruling these other nations. And it is God's plan through the nation of Israel in which Jesus becomes the perfect embodiment of the nation of Israel to re-inherit and reclaim the nations. On top of all that, these divine beings, they're called stars. They're called stars. But not only that, but God has this divine counsel that he works with. You see this in Job 1:6, where he talks about his divine counsel. The divine counsel are called a few different names. They're called the divine counsel, they're called the host of heaven and the heavenly hosts. They're called these various different things. And they are the divine beings, just like a war room, that help him decide various different choices together. Isaiah 6 is a divine counsel setting. Like, you're just tracking with this in the Bible. And most of you haven't been tracking with it, and I totally get that. It's not something we talk about very much on Sunday mornings. We don't talk about divine counsels very much. But the Revelation deals with the divine counsel all the time, and the stars that have been disinherited, the nations that have been disinherited. So, if you're tracking with the disinheriting of the nations motif, if you're tracking with that, then you come to Revelation 12 that talks about the dragon, and you come to Revelation 13 that talks about the beast, and you understand that who is at fault for the sin and destruction in the world, the answer is yes. This is why, through the prophets, they call both accountable, the divine beings who have rebelled, as well as the nation that has rebelled. So, by the time you get to Revelation, you just understand all this. Like, you just understand that God's plan of redemption is to re-inherit the nations. And in order to re-inherit the nations, he has to get rid of the beast, the people, the institutions who have decided to elevate themselves to God. They've given themselves over to sin. And he also has to conquer the serpent, the Satan, the devil, the dragon. He has to conquer all of that because there is a fusing together. Now, this all sounds a little bit weird with our Enlightenment way of thinking, and we're just trained to think like Enlightenment people. But part of you kind of intuitively understands this. And here's what I mean. Oh my gosh. You ever wonder sometimes, maybe it's just me, you ever wonder sometimes, like, man, why did I give in to that again? Like, why? It feels like there's some reality that just keeps pushing me off axis to give in to temptation. Like, it feels like there's just something that keeps leading me astray. And if you're not a Christian, you don't really have words for that, but you know that feeling. Like, you know that you're like, I have good willpower, but still, despite my willpower, I keep giving into these things. I keep giving into it. And when it comes to the message of the Bible, the answer is there are spiritual beings that are pushing us off axis, and you give in to sin. So who's at fault? Yes. And who, in the end, will be defeated? Yes. This makes sense? This makes sense? We have tried to, and this has been a recent revelation of mine that I've just tried to. It's been a frustration of mine that I haven't been able to articulate well, but we sometimes want to give Satan too much credit, as if he's somehow omnipresent and everywhere. He's not. Or we just want to ignore it like there is no spiritual force. Like, those are the two dangers, is we blame everything on the Satan, or we just say there is nothing. Like, those are the two dangers. And for me, now that I have this kind of cohesive language that the scriptures talk about, it's that who's at fault? Yes. I am to take ownership of my own poor choices. And I am placed in exile, and I experience death because of my own poor choices. But there is also this spiritual force that pushes me off axis, that pushes me to move away from the way God has designed it to work. And the book of Revelation gives hope that that thing that pushes you off axis, it will be defeated. It was defeated on the cross, and it will be fully defeated when Jesus returns. That the gates of hell cannot overcome it. Come on, and this is good stuff. Okay, sorry. So, when you get to the mark of the beast, you've just been tracking with this. This calls for wisdom. Revelation 13, verses 18. And I am skipping a lot of stuff because I only got 20 minutes and I want to get as much stuff done. Revelation 13:18. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Now, this has been misused and abused and mischaracterized to mean all sorts of various different things, and especially in the last 50 years. When there's been this remember I went back to here and I said, like, depending upon the cultural settings is what gets pushed to the surface as most important. And in the last 50 years, every Christian in America has been running like a chicken with their head cut off, thinking, we've lost the war, without realizing that Jesus already won the war, but that's beside the point. But they're just like, oh, Christianity's dying in America. It must be dying in the whole world. Oh my gosh, it's the end. Jesus, come back. Oh, all this type stuff. And so because of this, they've like taken this 666 thing to try to mean all of these various different things. They've tried to somehow map it on to just some little thing that's happening currently right now as a reality. And John didn't have some sort of chip in his, like if you've heard some crazy theories, like it's a chip in the head or something like that. John didn't have these kind of pictures in his mind when he was talking about this. He's hoping that you track with Jewish numerology and the way that they do names. Remember how we did the genealogy of Matthew? Do you remember how we did that? And that was a lot of fun, right? A lot of fun. In this, the 666 is just Nero Caesar in numbers. That's all it is. That's all it is. Because in Jewish and Christian, when they would go into Ephesus and give their money over and burn the oils, if Jews or Christians, both of them, if they did that, it for them was like they were taking the mark of the beast. The beast. Caesar. He's the beast. Just like Nebuchadnezzar was the beast. He's the beast. And so 666 just means the mark of the beast. But here's what it means. Here's what it means for us today. For us today, it means that in every culture, in every society, in every single generation, there are these moments where you are going to be tempted to give into the beast of the day. You are going to be tempted to give over to what they are asking you to do that goes completely and contrary against the will of God. And you are faced with the temptation of, will I give in to the beast, or will I choose King Jesus? For every generation, there's a mark. It just looks different for every generation. For this generation, it was, will I choose to follow Caesar Domitian, or will I choose to follow King Jesus? For us, it looks a little bit different. And for every generation, it looks a little bit different. And that's okay. So, see, we're pulling back the curtain a little bit. We don't have to be so stressed about all this. And I have, like, shortened and condensed things to no end. Oh, my gosh. Okay. Thank you. All right, let's do, do y'all want an outline of the book, or do y'all want to track with one more theme? One more theme, okay, all right. If I have time, I'll give an outline of the book, but I'm going to track with one more theme that's in the book of Revelation, okay? And it's the theme of hearing and seeing. Very early on in the letter, you're supposed to notice when there is a hearing and a seeing that happens back to back, that John's trying to make a theological point. You're supposed to notice this, okay? So take your Bible, Revelation chapter 1. Revelation chapter 1. So Revelation 1:10, no, it's okay. Revelation 1:10. I was in the Spirit of the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet, saying, now jump down. Then I turned, verse 12, then I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me, and on turning I saw 7 golden lampstands. In the midst of the 7 lampstands, one like a son of man. So he hears a trumpet, and he turns around, and he sees Jesus with these other churches. Golden lampstands are the churches. So he hears the trumpet, turns around, and sees Jesus. Now, that one's not that big a deal, but John is just cluing you in into how to read his writing. He's just trying to clue you in into pay attention when there's back-to-back hearing and seeing. Just pay attention to it, okay? So, Revelation 5:5. Revelation 5:5. And one of the elders said to me, Weep no more. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has conquered so that he can open the scrolls and its 7 seas. The elder says, behold, the conquering king is here. Verse 6. And between the throne and the 4 living creatures and among the elders, I saw a lamb standing as though it had been slain. See, he heard the mighty king, and he turned around and he saw the slain lamb. The way in which the king conquered was not through military might, but through his own death. See, it's trying to hope. John's just hoping you track with this. That he heard the mighty king, and he turns around and he sees the lamb that has been slain. And the way in which God's kingdom was inaugurated on earth was not through Jesus coming down and overthrowing Rome through violence, but through taking all of the violence of Rome on his shoulders and dying for every Roman and for every one of us. See, he heard a mighty king, but he saw a slain lamb. Come on. This is beckoning us. This is beckoning us. When they see us, they see a mighty warrior in the name, or they hear us talking, they hear us being mighty warriors for Jesus. But when they see us willing to die on their behalf. It doesn't matter what Babylon throws our way. Our king won through his own death. Come on, beautiful stuff. Let's go. Some more. Y'all gonna get me jazzed up. Somebody's gonna get saved tonight. It's happening, okay? Revelation 7:4. Revelation 7:4. This is so key. And I heard the number of the sealed, 144,000. 12,000 times 12,000. That's all it is. And I heard the number of the sealed, 144,000 sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. So who's saved? The Israelites. That's what I heard. Jump down. Jump down to verse 9. After this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and people and languages, standing there before the throne, before the Lamb, clothed in white robes and palm branches in their hands. I heard that God just saved the Israelites, but when I looked up and saw, it was us. It was all of us. Praise Jesus. There has been a reclaiming of the nations. There has been a reclaiming that through the cross and resurrection, it started, and through his return, it will be finished. That all people, tribes, tongues, nations are invited to participate in this kingdom of God. And it's an upside-down kingdom of God because you think you're coming in as a warrior, but you're leaving on your deathbed. But in leaving on your deathbed and extending the same sacrificial love that Jesus gives to you, we invite other people to participate in this, knowing that death isn't the final victor. Death has no sting because Revelation 21 and 22 are coming. And in Revelation 21 and 22, there is a new heaven and new earth married together here on earth. Once again, the Eden is here and we experience resurrection and life. There is no sea, there is no death, there is no dragon. We experience life to the fullest. Come on, this book is a book of hope. This book is a massive book of hope. That also should scare the dickens out of you. I just said dickens. Should scare the mess out of you. Because, hear me, if you follow Jesus, you might die. You might die by your Babylon. And I don't mean like somebody's going to bully you. I mean like die. I mean, that's possible. And this book is a reminder that death has no hold on us. That the grave isn't the final answer. That death isn't victorious, but life wins. I'll preach for a second. Just let it go. I am thoroughly bothered by two fundamental messages that the American church keeps propagating and pushing forward. The first thing that bothers me to no end is this weak-willed, woe is me, oh man, America's lost, so Jesus must have lost mindset. If you believe that, and if you've started to talk like that, then you miss the point of King Jesus ushering in his kingdom on the cross and the resurrection. You miss the point. His kingdom is alive and active here now, and we are invited to participate in that kingdom. And it doesn't matter what Rome comes our way, it doesn't matter what Rome we live in. If tomorrow Christianity is illegal in this country, tomorrow they come and blow this church up like they've done in China, if tomorrow that happens, we have not lost. Our king is still on the throne. So, I know I'm just talking to a few people in here, but as Christians, quit talking like cowards. Like American Christianity is just filled with a bunch of cowards that think we have lost. Our king won, and he was victorious 2,000 years ago, and he is on the throne regardless of what seems like happening here. So that's number one frustration, is that we have just watered down coward Christianity. Number two, in the Christian world that we live in, American Christianity, it appears to me, as best as I can tell, that the ideal state we pursue is safety and happiness. Like that's just what we run after. And if we're not safe and happy, then God's not doing his job. Jesus lived a perfect and sinless life. He didn't mess up once. And the end result of his perfect and sinless life was a death on the cross. How dare you think yours will be any different? We very well could give our lives up one day for Jesus Christ. It might never happen. I hope it never does. But it could. And even if it does, our King is still victorious. We don't need to cower. We don't need to be cowardly. But we are able to be bold in the name of Jesus, knowing that he is king regardless of who tries to pretend like they're king. Because that seat is temporary. Yeah. This is just a hot button topic for me. And I am just over the cowardly way that we talk about Christianity. Because the cowardly way we talk about Christianity robs and diminishes what Jesus did on the cross and resurrection. He won. He won. And the gates of hell aren't going to overcome it, and Satan can't overcome it, and Rome can't overcome it, and Babylon can't overcome it, and America can't overcome it, and North Korea can't overcome it, and every empire that ever rises and falls cannot overcome it. This is why your joy should not rest on how well America is doing. That ain't where your joy rests. Your joy rests in King Jesus and in King Jesus alone. I was going to give an outline, but there ain't no use. Let's pray and we'll be done. Yeah. Dear Lord, this is a night that I pray we have a quiet resilience, knowing that you are King, you are Lord, and this demands our allegiance. That it demands our allegiance in our behavior, it demands our allegiance in our thought life, it demands our allegiance in every realm of our life. Lord, I pray that we become a people who become confident in your kingship, that we don't cower, that we don't become people who our joy or happiness rest upon something that happens in our own nation, but that our joy resides squarely on the work, the saving work of the cross and the resurrection. It is in your name that we pray. Amen. C.S. Lewis wrote in his great book called The Great Divorce, he said, in the end, there will be two types of people. There will either be those who say to God, thy will be done, or those to whom God says, thy will be done. May we be people that say, thy will be done. Thanks for being in my class. I hope you've liked it. Yeah.